Okay, this is a long debate that started, I would say, back really beginning in the 70s. People began to talk about process and product, and they began to talk about the difference between simply looking at a paper and deciding what the sort of score or grade would be on it. This is the way I went to college. In my freshman writing class, we wrote a paper a week. We handed it in on Friday, we got it back on Monday, and the papers that were the best got to be read aloud in class. And then we talked about literature for the week, and then we wrote another paper and handed it in. That's the product model. We also used various modes. We wrote comparison, contrast, classification. And actually, for us, it was okay because we were all writers and we just had fun playing with the forms. But I don't think it would have taught anybody to write at all. Somewhere along the line, so that people began to look at the whole question of how writing gets itself made. And that's the really important thing for me, that there are many, many writing processes. Each person has a different process for each rhetorical situation. I write one way if I'm zipping off an email. I write a very different way if I'm trying to sort my thinking out on a given topic or subject. I write yet a different way if I'm covering materials that I already know and I'm getting them out. So many, many different processes for every single writer, and many, many different processes that vary between writers. And the post process really is looking at those multiple approaches. What happened with the process is what often happens. People take much more complex ideas and set them down. So we will do three drafts of this paper, and then we'll hand it in. We'll do, in fact, our writing program has some problems with making everything the same, because that's not how we write. We don't do all papers the same, and we don't all do it the same. So it's really, really a disaster to turn process into a kind of product thing where we have 3 different drafts set in stone and we do the same things with each of them, because that's just not how the creative process works. It's processes. It's very, very messy, and I don't think we have ever allowed for that messiness. I respond to student writing, whether it's a freshman paper or whether it's a graduate paper or dissertation chapter, as I would respond to a peer in my writing group. I belong to a poetry writing group, and when I respond to their texts, I try to bring something to that text. I try to add something that will make it richer, or that will rearrange it and rethink some of the ideas. So when I respond to a student paper, I respond with the same honor and the same kind of interest that I would respond to a fellow poet's poem. That's the approach that I try to take in every level of response to paper. And that's what writing groups do. The Inklings, I wrote my dissertation on C.S. Lewis a long time ago. The Tolkien and Lewis, Dyson, Owen Barfield, Dorothy Sayers had a group called the Inklings, and they would get together. Dorothy Sayers wasn't always there, but the rest of them would get there on Tuesdays and Thursdays at the pub, and they would give themselves writing assignments. And then they would write them, and they would respond, and they would make suggestions. And they did this for 35 years. And the results of that are the Narnia Tales, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, you name it. Owen Barfield's writing on linguistics and ideas. All of these things came from the writing group getting together. So when I respond to a student paper, I'm trying to create the atmosphere and the feeling about that text the writing group has when it honors one another's texts. So that's responding to student papers, role modeling the kind of thing that leads to really exciting texts. My friend Ruth Fennick discovered a map that Ray Bradbury had drawn of Watseka, Illinois. And she wrote to Ray Bradbury and asked him if we could use it in our writing activities, and he wrote back and said he would be flattered to have us use his little map. So we produced an assignment that asks the writer to draw a map of the neighborhood in which that person grew up. And the neighborhood map then becomes a kind of template for writing. And you go through and mark areas where something happened that you remember. And then you write a description of what happened in that spot. I've done this many times, And every time something different happens, and every time I get a different paper out of it, or I get something else happening. It's really evocative. And if you read Bradbury's work, you can see how he takes Watseka, Illinois, in little spots on his map and turns it into Mars, or in Something Wicked This Way Comes, a fantasy world in a small town. This is probably the most exciting of assignments, but the model of the assignment, where the person draws something or writes something that evokes ideas, is something that I use in every writing class, every literature class I teach. I start with some kind of either writing, drawing, something to evoke the energies and the ideas and the memories that will enrich whatever's being written. So that's my all-time favorite assignment.